These past few days, I've been sitting with this Kristi Noem dog killer story, trying to decide if I wanted to make a video about it, if I even have anything to say about it worth sharing. First of all, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, if you've somehow missed this one, which, to be fair, even if you pay attention to news and politics, there have been more important things going on recently. So if this one got past you, it's totally understandable. The story is basically this. Kristi Noem, the Republican governor of the state of South Dakota, whose name has been mentioned as a possible running mate for Donald Trump, has a book coming out. And in the book, according to a review by The Guardian, there is a passage where Noem writes about this time she killed her dog. The dog's name was Cricket, and Noem was hoping to train Cricket to hunt pheasant. Noem took Cricket out on a pheasant hunt with some other dogs, older dogs, who she hoped would kind of settle Cricket down. Didn't work out that way. Cricket, as Noem tells it, ruined the hunt. Then after the hunt, Noem stopped by a friend's farm and Cricket got loose and killed a bunch of chickens. So, after all that, after declaring Cricket to be untrainable and useless as a hunting dog, Noem decided the only thing left to do was to put Cricket down. So she took Cricket to a gravel pit and shot her dead. There are so many things I could say about this. I could point out that Cricket was, again, according to Kristi Noem herself, who is the only source for any of this, was only 14 months old. A 14-month-old dog killed for being untrainable. If a dog is 14 months old and as rambunctious as Cricket apparently was, that's not untrainable, that's untrained. What had Kristi Noem or her family, or more likely her employees, been doing with Cricket up until then? If the intention was to make her into a hunting dog, why had she not been trained before this ill-fated hunting trip? And if she had been trained and was still this wild and incorrigible, I don't know, maybe just wait? Keep training her, give her time to grow up a little more and settle down, seeing as how she's barely over a fucking year old. What kind of fucking psychopath decides a 14-month-old dog is useless for hunting and has to be put down after one hunt? I could talk about that. Or I could talk about how Kristi Noem also writes that she, quote, hated Cricket, hated the dog, because according to her, the dog was less than useless. Because to Kristi Noem, dogs aren't companions to be loved. They're livestock. They exist to put in work, to serve a purpose. And if they can't serve that purpose, they might as well not exist. You're only permitted to live as long as you're useful. That's Kristi Noem's attitude toward dogs. I think it's safe to assume that's her attitude toward people as well, because, as I mentioned already, she's a Republican. I could talk about that too, but those are things I've seen lots of people talk about already, and I'd rather not just repeat what others have already said. So I've sat with this story for a few days, and yesterday, as I was thinking about it, something occurred to me that was unexpected at first, but after a minute, it came to make perfect sense. I was thinking about this Kristi Noem dog killing story, and I was reminded of my dad. My dad loves dogs. Maybe that's why I love dogs, too. Neither I nor my dad currently has a dog, nor have we had one since Star, my dog from age 5 through 21, died almost 23 years ago. What can I tell you? She's a tough act to follow. But we both love dogs, me and my dad. When he was younger, my dad worked as a guide at a private hunting club on the other side of Hancock, about half an hour's drive from our house. I've mentioned this place in videos a time or two before, Woodmont. Part of Dad's responsibilities at Woodmont was to maintain a healthy population of deer on the club's vast property, because deer were the primary game that members of the club and their guests came to hunt. And as a part of that responsibility, Dad would occasionally have to kill a dog. Every so often, there would be a wild dog at Woodmont, the result of someone deciding they didn't want their pet anymore and dropping them off in the woods to fend for themselves. Over time, if the dog survived, it would grow feral and would eventually just be a wild animal. Wild dogs are predators and could attack and kill deer, especially fawns. Woodmont also had a game farm where turkeys and chickens were raised, and if a wild dog found its way to the farm, it could wreak havoc there as well. When Dad found such a dog on the property, he was supposed to kill it. Perhaps today there would be better options for dealing with these wild dogs that didn't involve killing them. Perhaps there were better options back then. I don't know. My purpose in bringing it up here is not to start a debate over the necessity or rightness of what my dad did back then. My purpose is to tell you that it was part of my dad's job at Woodmont. It was something he believed he had to do, and he hated it. Even though it was his job, even though he thought it was the best thing for the dog, given the circumstances. Or if he didn't truly think that, it's at least what he told me. He hated it. I was only with him once when he had to kill a dog at Woodmont. I didn't actually witness the killing. I was, maybe 9 or 10. Dad saw the dog out the window as we were driving along one of the many dirt and gravel roads that had been cut through Woodmont's seemingly endless, densely forested acres. He pulled to a stop. He took his rifle from the rack behind our seats. He told me to stay in the truck, and I did. He got out, trudged into the woods in the direction the dog had been going. He disappeared down a hill where I could no longer see him. I heard him whistle to get the dog to turn toward him so he could get a better shot. A moment later, I heard the crack of my father's rifle. And soon after, he came back to the truck, returned his rifle to the rack, and we drove on. He didn't talk for a long time. We'd had Star for several years by then. She wasn't with us this time, but Dad would often bring her with him to Woodmont. She was never trained to hunt. We brought her to Woodmont to play, not to work, but she'd been there. One time she even got lost, and it took Dad a few hours to find her. I wonder if he thought of Star when he shot that other dog. I think he had to have, didn't he? What reminded me of my dad and of that story I just told you when I was thinking about the Kristi Noem story is how the killing of her dog, Cricket, is framed in her book. According to the review in The Guardian, Noem tells the story as an example of how she's willing to make the tough choices and do what needs to be done. Never mind that by her own telling, she hated the dog and doesn't seem remotely bothered by the killing of it, which seems to make it a poor example of the sort of difficult decision she's talking about. What struck me was how she's bragging about killing this poor innocent dog. She chose to include this story in her book, and she presents it as an anecdote that's supposed to reflect positively on her. She thinks the story of her killing Cricket makes her look good. I've never heard my dad brag about killing dogs at Woodmont. I doubt very much he ever has bragged about killing dogs at Woodmont to anyone. At this point, it's been decades since he had to do it. The club sold the Woodmont property to the state of Maryland in 1994, and at that point, Dad stopped working there, but my guess is he doesn't even like to think about it. He wasn't proud of killing those wild dogs. He didn't think it made him look tough or testified to some other good, noble, admirable quality. He hated doing it. He hated it. He hated it because he loved dogs, but more fundamentally, he hated it because for all his faults, and believe me, he has a few, my dad has two things that, from all available evidence, Kristi Noem lacks: a heart and a conscience. Then again, if the Cricket episode is indicative of how Kristi Noem normally deals with unteachable brute beasts who cross her path, maybe when Donald Trump does finally sit down to choose his running mate, we should all cross our fingers for her.